Who had a better year, Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers last year?
Aaron Rodgers.
But I mean, like you hear Rodgers saying, like, yeah, this could be my final
Russell
year.
Wilson had a more peaceful year.
I'm wondering, like, why don't you just go with Russell Wilson? How did they make the playoffs if the quarterback situation was so bad? Like how did they, if it was so awful,
and if you're basing
they had
it
to move
off
on
of,
after a year,
if you're basing it off of something else other than talent, right? And you're basing it off of maybe personality, like, do we want to deal with this type of personality? I mean, wouldn't you say that the one quarterback in the quarterback pool that you would say, man, I wonder if we could deal with this guy personality-wise, or if the city will embrace him, or how people will feel, or the media will feel. Wouldn't that be Aaron Rodgers that you would have some trepidation about, even with Russell? That's a big one to say. It's more than Russ, right?
It just says a lot to me about how people feel about Russell Wilson. That they'd rather deal with whatever comes with Aaron Rodgers than, we're good here with Russ.
That's what it sounds like. And unfortunately, it sounds as though Justin Fields just isn't good enough. He just isn't good enough in this scenario as a starter. And Russell Wilson, there's something about Russell Wilson that makes them not want to continue on with him as their quarterback.
Yeah.
Or it could be the idea that, you're getting to the point now where you don't know how much runway is left for Mike Tomlin. Like, is that, I hate to say, is that fair based upon his accomplishments as the head coach? But I just think that it's getting to a point of where now the focal point and the noise of the lack of more competitive seasons from the Steelers is now beginning to be a much more relevant conversation towards the head coach.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be what it is as well. Like, I don't have time to be playing around with you, Russ. We got to try to win it this year, or I might be looking for a job next year. It's possible.
It's going to be a pretty humbling moment for LaVar when he sees Rodgers have a sandwich.
Running out that tunnel, holding the American flag.
Why is that humbling?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I don't know. You said it wasn't going to happen. You said he wasn't going to have any Primanti brothers.
Yeah.
I don't recall saying that. I actually said that it could be a good fit for Rodgers because Mike Tomlin isn't going to be the type of coach that handles, things the way that maybe Salah or LaFleur have handled things, or even McCarthy. I just don't.
Well, those two are close too, right?
Who's that?
Tomlin and Rodgers are close.
Are they? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. When they play each other, there's usually a little back and forth. Oh. I do find that interesting because we keep saying are the Steelers going all in, and is this because of Mike Tomlin? Is it because of Mike Tomlin, or is it the ownership and the perception of the Rooney family with some of the things, like, for example, you just said, you're like, hey, they don't spend. Again, I think they spend. They just typically, what they do is they don't sign on big signing bonuses, and there's usually not large guarantees. And one of the things that I say, like, if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and really the organization take pride in it, is like they typically don't have a ton of dead money, dead cap money, where they're paying for players who are no longer on their roster. And I actually think that's one of the best ways of going about signing contracts with players is you're not taking up the salary cap space that you do have with a bunch of guys who are somewhere else because you made mistakes, right? Like, they kind of pay the guys what they pay the guys, and when they don't feel like they're valuing the team anymore, they move on. But I also wonder, going back to the perception part, is that NFLPA report card. Like, I don't know how you guys view the Steelers. I view them as a great organization. They're one that when you go there, you get developed. You're going to be competitive, not only for the division, but for the playoffs. And it's been that way for a long time. And you could say it's Mike Tomlin, but, it was like that with Bill Cowher. It was like that before Bill Cowher. I mean, it doesn't matter who you go to. But I bring up this NFLPA report card because they didn't always track the players' impressions of owners. They've only done it the past 2 years. And the first year, it was an F-. right? Or F, excuse me. The Chiefs, actually, after winning back-to-back Super Bowls, got an F-, which obviously raised some eyebrows. You're going, wait, what the heck? How was Clark Hunt an F- after they just won 2 Super Bowls? But then you start to read and you figure out a little more why. But the Steelers were an F. And then this past year, they were a D. And that's by far, by the way, one of the lowest in the league. Like, there's extreme separation. And look, maybe some of the owners care, maybe they don't. I would think that an organization that prides themselves on success, on winning, on doing the right thing, like the Rooneys and obviously the Steelers have done, they care about that sort of thing. Like, whatever's going on, obviously our players don't feel like our ownership is making the moves or doing the things we need to win or be competitive or, change the perception of what we are as owners. And maybe it's a different philosophical approach this offseason in particular because of where they've been at, right? Like, maybe there were some players last year who were like, man, they didn't really take figuring out who could be our quarterback that seriously. So here we are now. The Steelers, who are being active, getting DK Metcalf, assign him to a 4-year extension. Now you got Aaron Rodgers, potentially. We'll see if the Giants can, have a final say in this, but you have Rodgers with the opportunity to come and be your quarterback. And again, I said this about the Steelers last year. Like, Russell Wilson's play was good enough, at least in the beginning too, but how it finished out, he kind of cooled off, but to get him to the playoffs and to be competitive. If Rodgers plays how he did last year with that defense, like, they're good enough. That's one of the things that I think we keep kind of missing is that they just needed competent quarterback play. So now I would guess you're going to have it, or at least you've got a better shot at having now with Rodgers being there. And I do think there's a relationship and a desire between him and Arthur Smith. Now, there's a thought that Arthur Smith likes having a dual threat quarterback, which is true. Like, he's usually had a quarterback in his system that can move around, and that's not going to be the case with Aaron Rodgers at this point in time in his career. But again, there's, probably some sort of relationship through the years between those two off the field where they've known one another, and there's going to be a sense of comfort and all that. But I mean, again, there's a lot to be determined at this point. But I do wonder if the Steelers ownership is actually playing the largest role for why they're being so active this offseason.
I wonder if it might be the gap that is possibly developing between, the top teams, the top tier teams in that division, because it's so competitive. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is playing at a high level. Joe Burrow is playing at a high level. Now, there's question marks as to what Cincinnati is going to do, and does that play? How much does that play a part in how good they're going to be? But I wonder if this is a move where you're saying, we thought we were getting because obviously Justin Fields to them wasn't good enough last year coming into the season. And maybe it was because they're looking at the other quarterbacks in the division.
But doesn't it feel like Cincinnati's better than Pittsburgh? Yet it was Pittsburgh who made the playoffs.
I mean, they certainly have a better quarterback. So you
weird.
have a better opportunity of improving your circumstances when you have a quarterback as good as he is and a receiver who's as good as Jamar Chase is. So I just wonder if this may be more so kind of a response. Again, back to the point, they brought in Russell Wilson with Justin Fields, just in case Justin Fields wasn't good enough to close down the gap between the other quarterbacks in this division. You got to try to keep pace with what's going on in your division. And regardless of how people view the Cincinnati Bengals, they've actually done a good job of building a team good enough to have made it to the Super Bowl at one point and was good enough to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, who have become the gold standard of measurement of a good team. So I wonder if this is there's always that whole race for arms type of scenario. And does Aaron Rodgers actually even things up on the playing field as it applies to the quarterbacks that are in that division? And I would say clearly you definitely stand a better chance with DK Metcalf and Pickens with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback versus anybody else that's out there, including what you have on your current roster.